If you were asked how many of your fellow Americans died while storming the beaches of Normandy for the sake of freedom, would you know? Would your children know? It is said that those men and women who endured during World War II are the greatest generation. Their strength and dedication to patriotic duty transformed and unified the nation while preserving freedom in the lives across the entire world. Those who fought would tell you that the true heroes never made it home. We Americans owe our freedom and posterity to those who have worn our nation's uniform in World War I and II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, and the Middle East, and those who continue to wear this nation's uniform. So that the stories of our nation's heroes are not lost, College of the Ozarks created a Patriotic Travel Program, wherein students escort veterans to their fields of battle. Over the past months, students have accompanied veterans to several battle sites, including the beaches of Normandy, the towns and riverbanks of Belgium, the forests and fields of Germany, and the beaches of Okinawa and Iwo Jima. These trips provide a powerful bridge between two generations. For the students, they grow to understand and appreciate the sacrifices that were made for freedom. For the veterans, they not only have closure from the war, but they also know that their stories will not be forgotten.
My name is Ashlyn Moore. I'm a sophomore here at College of the Ozarks from Rogersville, Missouri.
My name is Sam Porter. I actually grew up in the Middle East. My parents are Christian missionaries over there, and I'm here at College of the Ozarks as a senior.
I was one of the students that was chosen to participate in a trip with 10 World War II veterans back to Normandy, France for the 65th anniversary.
I was lucky enough to be picked for the third trip that we did, and that was to Belgium, to the area where the Battle of the Bulge was fought. The veteran that I was assigned to, his name was Don Allen, and I'm smiling just thinking about him. He was in the 2nd Armored Division.
My veteran's name was Mr. John Sapola. He was in the 101st Airborne, and John told me a lot about his experiences there, and the number one thing that he told me was, you know, Ashlyn, I didn't share this with anybody else in my life. He said, I didn't really tell my family members about this. He said, because it was just something that was too painful.
All of history was brought to life being with these veterans there who had walked through these places and seen these places. I'll never forget the first time we went and saw foxholes, which is little depressions in the ground that the soldiers would dig out to protect themselves from shrapnel. We went out into the woods with a man who was in the 101st Airborne. His name was Wilson Caldwell. And I remember him walking up to one of those foxholes and then kind of taking a slow step into it and standing there. And I remember just watching his face, and it was just really blank. Like he was looking out over this field, probably imagining exactly how it had been 65 years before. Wilson started talking and just explaining, this is how I felt when I was down in these foxholes. The fear, the miserable conditions of being in this cold snow. And then explaining, he said one of the worst things that he ever experienced was being next to these 18-year-old boys who'd been shot, and the last thing that they start crying for is their mothers. When you're standing there on a field with a man who has fought in that field and shed blood in that field and watched his friends die in that field, there is a connection there that you can make with that veteran that is indescribable.
My relationship with John was absolutely wonderful. I walked through the streets of St. Mary-Glise with him, which is actually where he dropped the morning of the invasion. All of a sudden, John just stopped, and he was just frozen, and I turned back and I looked around, and he was just standing there staring up at this tree. He eventually was able to tell me that this tree right there was where one of his buddies was hung up. He landed, he was a parachuter, he got hung up in the branches and he never made it down because the German forces just, you know, slaughtered him right there in the tree. Growing up in the American public school system, I have learned about World War II since I was a small child in all of my history classes. And so I thought that I was pretty well educated and prepared to go on this trip, but what I discovered was that 20 years of school that I have been through didn't account for the 2 weeks that I spent with John.
In a strange way, the greatest gift that I got from this trip was realizing that I would never understand. Being over there with them, watching them cry or laugh together, seeing all these places that they've been to, and realizing that I would probably never be in a position where I would be fighting, I think is one of the greatest gifts that they have given me, is not knowing war on a first-hand basis because they knew it back then.
If I could send every college student in America on a trip like this, I would. You have to understand the price, the sacrifice, because that gives you a whole new outlook. It shows you what it means to be an American citizen.
This experience of realizing what American troops had done overseas and done for the world and not just for America awakened this love and passion in my heart for America. And I think that incredible example of self-sacrifice is what I would like to pass on to my children, to my friends here, that, you know what, a legacy that America has had for a very long time is a legacy of self-sacrifice, the legacy of being willing to help people in need, even if they're not Americans.
One of the veterans came up to me at the end of the trip, and he had been very emotional that day. And he had been reflecting a lot on a lot of his fallen friends, and he was so emotional he could hardly speak. And I was just standing there holding his hand, and he just looked at me, and he said, "Ashlyn," he said, "make it worth it." He said, "Make your life worth the sacrifice." And that is something that I vow to do every single day. I realize that it is now not only my honor, but it's my responsibility to pass on this story to future generations. As long as I have a voice, I promise to pass on their story, because it's one that cannot be forgotten.